Welcome to We Not Me, Inclusion in Action, the podcast that celebrates the many hands and hearts that make our schools work. From teachers and students to parents, leaders, policymakers, and partners behind the scenes, this show honors the people who show up every day to create a better future through education. Because real change doesn't happen in silos. It happens when we come together, when we lead with empathy, act with courage, and believe in what's possible. This is We Not Me, where everyone has a seat at the table and every voice matters. Let's get to it.
I love all the connections that LinkedIn brings.
Yes, I hadn't looked recently, but
Yeah, I know. It is amazing.
it's the social media I end up using the most. I was reluctant a few years ago thinking that's the last thing I need is another social media account.
I don't see that we're connected.
That's where we met.
Right.
Maybe I imagined that.
And when my intern, Santiago, reached out to you, he found you guys. Disrupting the Status Quo in Education with Heart. That's you, right? Okay, I'm following.
Okay, great.
Now we're connected.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm recording. Sometimes this is the best way to intro. Anyway, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
I'm delighted.
Tell me a little bit about you, Haley-Coleman. You are the founder of GlobalWare, but tell me what brings you to GlobalWare, and then we'll talk more about your company.
I had a diverse background academically and in terms of my corporate experience, everything from working in museums. I had a master's in art history and an MBA in international business. I did just all sorts of weird bips and bobs that ostensibly didn't fit together, except they were tied together through this interest in anything involving a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
I still feel very much like I'm on that original path that looked so circuitous when I started out several decades ago. That's still what interests me. What is it that ties us together, culture to culture? What are some of the really interesting fundamental differences? How can we stand aside one another to make each other's lives better?
Did you grow up in an environment where you traveled a lot?
Yes, I did. My high school and middle school had borders, and we had people from all over the world. Various things brought me to different cultures. My grandmother traveled all over and would take me with her, and she was really drawn to, she made jewelry, but she was really interested in places like India as opposed to Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Even her house, I remember being full of so many different things. It was the kind of place where you'd go chock full of a life lived in interesting places. There was some piece of that I think always appealed to me and stayed there. In the schools I went to, we included studying art history, culture, and languages. So those were always things that interest me, still do.
So what part of the country did you grow up in?
Texas is not necessarily the place you would think to learn about lots of different countries, but we did. Because we are so close to Mexico, our grocery stores are wonderful places to go because you see reflected there all of the different influences that have made us an interesting state. We're seeing some changes and shakeup and all that right now. But fundamentally, we do have even our indigenous cultures here that people might not think of, but we as a nation certainly have lots of different interesting cultures that to look to.
I grew up in small rural Kansas and always felt like I don't think I fit in here. I've always been interested and curious about other places, but haven't had as many opportunities to travel. I've been to Japan and some places in Europe, but hopefully get to have a lot more opportunities to travel. I want to hear more about GlobalWare. So GlobalWare creates volunteer experiences for people. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Specifically, we are fitting in the space of short-term, very organized service programs for people. In a sense, it's like someone going to our website, like you would book a cruise. This is where I'm going, and this is the date I'm going. We take care of everything else except for airfare. So it was really born out of two realizations that most people they do want to make a difference, but they're overwhelmed by the logistics. They may not have 2.5 years to give to the Peace Corps. They may not be involved in a church that is offering regular service abroad, or they may feel that if there's a country or culture that they want to connect to, they're not necessarily seeing it as a place that needs rescuing, but looking at a place where they can experience it in a partnership perspective instead of thinking we're going there to save them. We are participating as equals alongside a community to address whatever challenges they believe they have. In our view, it's a very collaborative process and program. When people are reaching out, they may be installing concrete floors in the homes of single moms. We are building homes, wattle and daub style in Kenya. We assembling wheelchairs for our landmine victims in Cambodia. So they are varied in terms of the projects. It's eliminating any of the logistical setup. How am I going to know what to eat? How am I going to get from point A to point B? How are the materials going to be there? Am I going to have somebody bilingual with me? Is medical insurance included? So we try and make it super easy so that people can just plug and play, sign up, get involved quickly and meaningfully in a structured way. We do have free time and cultural and leisure activities included, but we also include reflective exercises in the evening. We'll ask everybody, what's a kindness you observed today? In the morning, we'll begin with discussing some cultural element that a more traditional tourist wouldn't likely get to experience or appreciate.
I love that part. The touristy stuff is fine, but the good stuff is what are the locals? That's the part of traveling.
What do the locals do? I still think there's obviously a place for traditional tourism. Seeing churches and museums is a part of my background, getting on a bus, being with groups of other people. But this is very different from that. When you're seeing any of the cultural aspects in our community, you tend to be seeing them more from a local's perspective. Yes, you go and see Tika in Guatemala, but you're also going to learn how to make tortillas from the local women's initiative using hand-grained cornmeal. This says something about their culture, how they live, the importance of what they eat, how they do it. So we feel like it's a more integrated, meaningful experience in terms of changing your headspace around a culture and not just getting good photos of where you go. But again, I think there's room for all of it.
What a huge undertaking to such an organization, like worldwide organization, and all the pieces that go into organizing each trip. What inspired you to put all of these things together and develop this?
So when I tried to find something like this for myself, I just couldn't find it. And when I asked other organizations if I could just participate for a few days, because I really don't have 3 or 6 weeks to give, and when I realized that what I was looking for really didn't exist, that was the genesis of it for me. When I started setting up these kinds of experiences on my own, coming back and explaining to people what the experience was like and realizing that other people seemed excited about it too and wanted to do it. And that's really what led me down the path.
Do you have a specific process for choosing which communities you work with? What does that look like?
It's interesting because we aren't really doing it in a way that somebody would pick a product off a shelf. Originally, it involved a whole lot of looking and interviewing and asking local organizations, what are their needs? Have they already identified a way they want to address them? We are only going to work where the community wants us to be, right? Now, fortunately, a lot of communities and organizations come to us and ask if we can send volunteers to them. That makes our job easier. We are still running those projects and programs past our own criteria. For us, they have to be safe. We're not going to put people high on ladders or operating heavy equipment and machinery. We're not handling bodily fluids because we're not Doctors Without Borders. We're not requiring any skills. We're looking for projects where we can make a meaningful difference in a short period of time with unskilled workers in a place that's safe and culturally interesting. Once we see that the community wants this and they've identified good projects that they will let us work alongside them, then we look through all of our criteria. And hopefully, if we can find a match, that's how we choose it. So it takes time.
It sounds like respect for the local culture and making sure that it's not superficial change is also something that's really key to your organization.
It begins and ends with the local community, really. And we have made stumbles before when we have forgotten a part of that process. For example, if we've been asked to help bring a new water source into a community, we help them dig the ditch, bring in the pipes, and then we brought all these Sawyer water filters that work beautifully at lower elevations, but they don't work that well at higher elevations. So we've certainly made mistakes over time to get to where we are. The local community is everything for us. They have to choose us to be where we are invited, and that there's a genuine local champion asking for that collaboration so that we know the project has a chance of long-term survival, whether volunteers are present or not. And since our volunteers are going pretty much every other week throughout the year, we need to make sure that as our volunteers are coming and seeing what's been done before, it's very clear that this is meaningful, this was useful, and it's still here.
How many locations do you have around the world?
I believe we have 26 right now. It is always changing a little bit because, for example, if the safety situation looks like it's going to change, we try and cut that off as soon as we see that coming. So, for example, at Tanzania right now, I think we're going to be pausing that program because there have been protests, and we're not a paramilitary organization. So we're not going to put our volunteers any place where there looks like the possibility of risk. Now, that said, we cannot eliminate all risk. And so while we pay for all sorts of insurance, somebody could step on a nail anywhere in the world. There are things we do to minimize risk. We include in our materials recommended vaccinations, even though we're not allowed to recommend them. We'll say what other organizations recommend, how we choose a project, what materials it uses, and the location itself, any sort of safety issues they're having. We have to make sure that we've checked all those boxes. The number of programs we have changes based on any of those things changing. If the safety situation changes, if there's a disease outbreak, if there is some kind of massive weather event like an earthquake that has made something non-navigable, then that will alter where our programs are.
How do you prepare your volunteers?
So once a volunteer has registered, they usually want to call and talk to us first, which we love doing. They're like, well, I just don't know where to go. I've never done this before. We get a chance to chat with them through that. Then we start sending them our materials, and we try and make it easy. When we have groups, usually if a group is traveling together, it could be a book club, it could be a corporate group, a school group, church group.
We find that in those cases,
Usually maybe 10 to 20% of that group has read our materials and the rest haven't. And we're designed to where as long as you've taken care of any sort of entry requirements, like if you're needing a visa to go to India, aside from that, you can learn everything on arrival. Our coordinator goes through everything when they pick you up. It is a very guided process, but we hope that they're reading all of our orientation materials because that's where we talk about what's the local community like, what we think you should pack, setting expectations in terms of what the cultural and leisure activities will be, how much free time you'll have. So we hope people will read our orientation materials. We also have podcasts, YouTube videos on all of our programs so that people can get a sense for them that way. Now, when individuals register, there seems to be a much higher uptake in terms of preparing themselves for it and reading everything we send them. We feel like we do what we can in terms of all our materials, but then we find that we'll show up without having done much to prepare. That's where our coordinator will immediately have our orientation upon arrival to tell them, okay, this is what to expect. This is what our schedule is going to be. These are when you're going to have free time. This is when we're going to do cultural activities. We have a variety of different things we do to try and prepare, but it's amazing how many people don't prepare at all.
How many?
And it still works out, which is great.
Just one coordinator that goes with them?
So all of our coordinators are local and live on location. And this is what I mean by it starts and ends local. And almost all of our coordinators, I would bet our average age of our coordinators probably age like 58. You know, there are people who've been with us for years and years, really understand the local community, and they're bilingual so that they are always in touch with what's happening now in the community. And they're able to speak from within about what our presence has meant. We really feel like we're very reliant on our coordinators to deliver and shepherd the experience that we hope everyone has. These are people who have a very vested interest in the community and local knowledge, but also have known volunteers for years. So they know what kinds of foods the volunteers are excited about or anything they're afraid about, where to get money and things like that. So they're integral to making sure our programs go well.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a way of measuring what you would consider success in each community you work in?
We don't look at it in the same way that a for-profit corporation would look like, because we know there's not like we're looking at dollars created or anything like that. So these are pretty concrete, identifiable outcomes. So how many kids got off a dirt floor because we installed a foundation? How many families have we made an Adobe Lorena stove for so that they're using 80% less firewood to keep their fires going and pulling that smoke out of the home so that they're not inhaling it? But we are always in a dialogue. So we're not looking at spreadsheets the way most companies would, because this is such a high touch, human to human space. So, in a sense, it's also measuring the length of these beautiful relationships we've established
Right.
over years and providing the larger scope of, are we making things safer, healthier, economically more stable alongside the community with whatever it is we're doing.
So has that evolved over the years?
I would say the philosophy hasn't changed so much, but how we deliver it might. And our volunteers they're a huge part of the equation too. And they will often come up with project ideas or do things spontaneously with their free time. Like, I can't tell you how many times people have said, let's go buy a soccer net goal for that community. And somebody else say, let's go buy a bunch of balls. We always have, if you have extra space in your suitcase and you want to bring any of the following, feel free to do it. They're always used, but no expectation of doing it. We're amazed at how many people will do things locally that weren't even on our radar. That has changed because the volunteers themselves bring a lot. We have families that will see other family needs. Like, we had a company that bought a new roof for a home of one of our locals, just about a year ago, because they saw that it was needed. While our philosophy has pretty much stayed the same, we're continually surprised by what comes out of the experiences based on what the volunteers do. That's really neat to see.
Can you tell our listeners about some of the most exciting projects you have going on right now?
We have so many. One that's really exciting just because of the visibility it's gotten is, we work in Bhutan. We've been working there since we were there at the invitation of His Majesty. They have a king who voluntarily gave up all of his power a few years ago, and he's beloved. He lives very simply in a modest home. A few years ago, our coordinator introduced baseball to the country, and there was a photo taken of kids playing baseball in front of one of the Buddha statues wearing their traditional dress that went viral all over ESPN. And so we're in the process of trying to create a really nice, new, cool baseball stadium at their request, which is sort of a neat and interesting project for people who have sports interests, particularly baseball, because it's been a very new, interesting way that the locals are engaging with one another and our volunteers interact with them. I feel like any of these projects, it's getting to know the families. When we're building these wattle and daub style homes, like think of an adobe home, you're getting to know the family you're building it for. That's where the real connection and magic happens, getting to see and know these families, how they live, getting to really see the beauty in their lives. I think of the funerals in Kenya that are so different from ours in the Western world, where they are confronted with death on a much more frequent basis than most of our volunteers for all sorts of reasons and lack of access to healthcare and so forth, even transportation to get to us. If you don't own a car and you have a heart attack, how long is it going to be before you get care? And if you're just a tourist into that community, you're not going to see that. When we go to the funerals, the whole community comes. There's so much food, music, drumming, and dancing. It's not what we expect out of a funeral. People aren't wearing all black. It is a very different experience. Our projects, as important as they are in terms of making life better for and with someone, it's also about learning about that family. That community. So I could go into our projects and why they're exciting, but it's the local community recipients that we're working alongside that make it so good.
That's amazing. So if somebody is interested in traveling with your company and volunteering, about how much would they expect to spend?
Well, we just recently raised our prices reluctantly. We didn't want to do it, but there has been inflation and our currency value has fallen, the United States dollar. So that's just an unfortunate reality of people who are willing and able to travel outside of our borders. It depends on the program, but I'd say right now it's roughly $1,200 to $1,800 for the week. It's a tax deduction against your income. It covers your food, accommodations, medical insurance, coordinated materials, all that kind of thing. We are confronted with one of two reactions. Either how can you do it that inexpensively? And on the other hand, why do I have to pay to volunteer? It's our only source of funding to pay for our local foremen that are looking to see is the moisture content of the concrete and making sure the materials and tools are there. We really get confronted with both. I wish we could wave a magic wand and make money not a component. And yet we are providing jobs locally by doing this. The last thing we want to do is take away paid jobs for our local communities where most have a hard time feeding that aren't in a position to give food and free accommodations. There is a cost affiliated with it, but we feel like it's pretty much in line with a relatively modest international vacation. It just comes with a really big impact internally and externally.
Yeah, my feeling is that is quite reasonable.
And we do have two exceptions to that, our Cuba and our Bhutan programs for various reasons. Those are more expensive, and I wish they weren't, but it is a reality.
What's your vision for the future of volunteer travel?
I'm always excited when we have more volunteers that never thought they could do this, either because they are worried about all the things, not speaking the language. Am I going to like the food? Is it going to be safe? And so my vision for the future is always when we get volunteers experiencing that for the first time. We have a whole lot of repeat volunteers, but I really am excited when we can get people who've just never envisioned this for themselves. And, we've seen a lot of one of the areas of growth that we did not anticipate is some of the corporate backing that's happening in terms of employers offering this as a benefit to their employees. They will do contribution matching so that if a volunteer is paying $700 to participate, a company will often do contribution matching so that it halves the cost, where they will give service paid days off, volunteer paid days off. They may get 10 days of vacation plus another 5 if they're using those 5 for service. I would love to see more growth like that so that employees are able to feel gratitude for what they have and also reconnect and feel empowered because they're making a difference in someone's life. It really is a restoration impact. Great PR for the company. It's great for the community. It's great for the volunteer. So my vision would be that all employers over a certain size would allow their employees to participate in this kind of thing and feel like they're getting to choose where they want to serve and when they want to serve, instead of just getting on board with one main charity that the company wants to support. I'd really like to see, I have all sorts of things I'd like to see, but that'd be one of them.
That would be an incredible opportunity. If somebody wants to volunteer, how can they get a hold of you?
So we're all the places where people think to look if they look up Globe Aware. The biggest mistake people make is they think we're global aware instead of Globe Aware. We're just 3 syllables. Our website is the big starting point. Although a lot of people, who is somebody who's looking to do this and they're just not sure, and they start following us on social media, see clips on Facebook and Instagram, seeing what our volunteers are doing, how they're living, what the bathrooms are like, all of that. It's a nice way to ramp up into knowing more about this kind of experience. Our YouTube channel and podcast provide a lot of content so that people can get a sense for this kind of experience and hear from interviews with our coordinators and return volunteers. We have a phone number, emails, and all that stuff. We love talking with volunteers who say, hey, I don't know where to go. I've been to Mexico before. Can you help me decide what I should do, where to go? We love having those kinds of chats. We're visible in all those places. If you were to Google Globe Aware, you would find us in every direction. We also have Canadian charity status. So we've got the globalaware.ca and all the Canadian stuff. We're in a lot of directions with our handle, news, and reviews.
Well, that sounds like an incredible opportunity. And what an amazing organization, Kimberly. I can't imagine what that has taken to develop and evolve over the last 20 years you've been in business. That is amazing. Thank you for all the work that you have done for all the people that you have impacted. Have you had any sort of measurement to count the volunteers that you have served?
Yes, we have, although I hesitate to give any because it can be hard to compare apples to apples. We'll have corporate groups that'll go out for 4 days and then people who will do 2 weeks. We have this tailored version in between, and then we'll take dates off when we know people want to go. There's really no apple to apple comparison there, but roughly about 3,000 a year participate. But again, that's rough because it really depends on how you look at it.
That's a huge number of volunteers and even more people receiving the benefit. So that is an amazing impact, Kimberly. You are doing huge things across the world. Thank you for all of that. And I hope that some of our listeners are inspired to participate. We haven't taken a honeymoon yet since we got married. So maybe I should talk to my husband about some sort of non-traditional honeymoon.
Oh, we'd love to have you. A lot of people combine service with traditional tourism and then a few days of service.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Nikki, thank you so much for having us.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the We Not Me Inclusion in Action podcast.